So you open up a paleoethnobotnist's cabinet and they're not actually keeping lunch in their cabinet, but you'll notice that there's a couple of boxes of quinoa sitting up here. And this is because quinoa is actually a relative of a very important plant that we see in the archaeological record in the southeast, and that's Chenopodium valeriandi. And so I have some samples here of the Chenopodium seeds that have come from the Plum Bayou Garden this past year. And Chenopodium valeriandi was a plant that was domesticated by peoples here in the southeast and mid-south, beginning about 4,500, 5,000 years ago. Specialization within archaeology is actually paleoethnobotany. I'm a paleoethnobotanist, which means that I study the prehistoric use of plants and the ways in which people were utilizing, cultivating, growing, interacting with, using, it's a big broad field of study, but it is essentially the ways in which people were using plants in the past. So one of the really interesting things about this garden and about this park and having this garden here at the park and having me as a part of the outreach and education for Toltec Mounds State Park is that this is one of the only places that you're going to see this kind of information that has to do with the use of plants for textiles and basketry in pretty much most of the eastern United States. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it has to do with the fact that we actually have an archaeologist here at a state park assisting with the interpretation and working with state parks interpreters. But the other thing is that I'm one of a very small handful of archaeologists who actually do this kind of research, who are looking at textiles and basketry and looking specifically at identifying the kinds of plants being used to make the textiles and basketry. So it's really one of the only places where you can walk into a garden like this, an interpretive garden, and see this kind of information on a panel, and in fact images of the textiles themselves. Oh, and I should also emphasize that Arkansas itself is one of the only states where you're going to really get this kind of information, see these kind of images, because we're one of the few places in the southeast United States where we have this incredible record of dry, well-preserved textiles and baskets that have come from the Ozark Plateau. In general, my role here with the state park, with Toltec, covers sort of two aspects of the park's mission and my mission as an archaeologist. So on the one hand, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about, looking at, documenting, tracking, and helping assist with just the preservation and conservation of cultural resources. The other big portion of my role here as an archaeologist has to do with working with Arkansas State Park staff in creating, developing, implementing public outreach programs, interpretive programs, and public education. And so, and this is always a kind of a fun aspect of the job in some ways, and also sort of always interesting to me, because you get a PhD in archaeology, not much of it has to do with how to talk to little kids. And so when you're working with state park interpreters, you have to kind of learn a whole different way of thinking about how to convey information.